Hi, everyone. Welcome to Automation Hour. And let's advance the slides. All right. Okay, if you're joining us for the first time, all lines are muted, and we will be posting the recording shortly, sometime after the session. So we'll post a link to the recording and the deck on our website, automationhour.com. It will also be posted on our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour. And if you haven't registered for our sessions through the end of July, I recommend it. Also, we added a special one for June 5th, where we'll have the Salesforce Automation Product Management folks on Automation Hour to talk about summer 20 enhancements that are coming along and maybe get a hint into some roadmap items as well. So I definitely recommend that you register for that, and you could go to automationhour.com and register for any of these sessions. And if you have a business use case with a cool automation solution, we are looking to book out for the rest of this year. So I included the link there to our sign-up sheet. So if you're interested, go and sign up, and then we'll reach back out to you to schedule you in a slot. And we cannot bring this free webinar series to you without our sponsor, Concrete.io. So thank you again for continuing to sponsor us. And here are your co-hosts, myself, Rakesh, and David. This was from last year's Midwest Dreamin. Hope to see you at Midwest Dreamin 2021 or any Salesforce events. Before we talk to Michelle, I wanted to throw it over to Rakesh to give a shout out to Virtual Dreamin.
Hey, thanks. Thanks, Dan. Hey, guys. I hope things are good at your end. So if you know or don't know, we are organized, me, Jitendra, and Amit Chaudhary. We are organizing, and with all our volunteers and advisory committee, we are organizing first virtual Dreaming, where we are going to run 3-track, 24 hours continuously for developers, admin, and architects. And we are expecting around 10 to 12 CTA Salesforce certified technical architect. So if you are interested, wants to learn more about developer, admin, or CTA track, if you are on one of those, do join. You can go to our website, virtualdreaming.com, and it's free of cost. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Rakesh.
Yeah.
All right, and with that, I'd love to introduce Michelle Hansen. She's a multiple Automation Hour presenter. So if you go to our YouTube channel, you can catch her past sessions. So we always love having Michelle back to present her cool automation solutions. So with that, let me hand it over to Michelle. You should have control now.
Awesome. Now I just have to figure out which screen it's giving me an option to share.
I'm seeing your desktop.
Fabulous. I knew it was going to be the wrong one. This is how we start great automation hours, everyone.
Now I see your deck.
Oh, yay. All right. We're doing this right today. Fabulous. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining. I'm thrilled you're here. So today's use case is how to send ad hoc notifications using the notification builder in Salesforce through Flow. So the first thing is we'll go through a couple of ideas of use cases and absolutely make sure you're chatting and asking your questions and throw out some other use cases. We're a Sales Cloud only shop, so I'm sure if you're using Service or any other part of Salesforce clouds, there's a lot more ways you could come up to use this. I'll demo the flow really quick so you can see what it does and how it functions, and then we'll dig into the guts. First of all, we'll talk through what custom notifications are and how you set up the different types, just in case you're not familiar. There is an unmanaged package that I pulled in to help me with one piece of this. It's from David Litton's Salesforce Sidekick blog, so thanks, shout out to him. Then I'll go step by step through the actual flow elements. I actually set the access for this flow differently than usual, so I want to run through that. And then also I chose to deploy it through the utility bar, which poses some unique issues because of the flow access. So we'll talk through as we're going step by step what I kind of ran into and how I fixed that issue as well. All right, in case you haven't noticed, I love my trail emojis and my Bitmojis, so they tend to show up. And with that, we're actually going to pull out of the presentation and we'll go live demo. So give me just a second and we'll dig in. Okay, so here you have my beautiful sandbox that I play in all the time. And this is where I'm going to go ahead and demo my use case. So essentially, we send way too many emails in my company. I'm sure none of you have that problem. But in an effort to try and reduce the amount of email that gets sent, we've been trying to push our users to use Chatter more, to be able to keep a lot more of that information inside Salesforce when it pertains to Salesforce specifically. The notifications I really like, especially because you have the option to get push notifications on your phone as well. So I thought, okay, now that I have access to this notification builder, what if I wanted to send out a notice that's not really tied to a specific record? So I can't really trigger it with a process or anything like that, but I need a way to get to the notification builder settings. And I went, okay, why don't I try doing that through Notification Builder? It's going to give me the ability to go, hey, sales team, can you please go update all of your opportunities by the end of the week so that we can run updated pipeline reports for the board meeting next week? Or as an admin, guys, I'm going to be doing maintenance tomorrow. Please remember that you need to stay away from, this object or get out of the system entirely from, start time to end time tomorrow. Or, after the fact, we send out a lot of information about, this is what was in the last release. Here's the things that have changed that you need to know about. And so if I want to make sure that it's something that they get notified about, I can now do that through this new send custom notification. So down here in my utility bar, I've got send notification. And so this just pops up into the utility bar window. And it's going to ask me at first 2 questions. And I used conditional visibility here because I didn't want it to be a huge page cluttered with things. So first question, who do we want to notify? I can either select specific users, specific groups of users, or I can say I just want everybody. So for example, if I select groups of users, I built a record choice set and pulled in all of my public groups. And it's important to realize that there is a difference between your public groups and your collaboration groups. So it's not a chatter group, it's definitely a public group. So, okay, I want this to go to a specific group or groups of users. Where do I want to actually notify them? Well, with COVID, everybody's home, they're not traveling, so I'm going to stick to desktop. Plus, it's easier to demo here in Automation Hour. And so let's take our use case of please update all of your opportunities. So I have inside sales and I have national sales. So those are the 2 groups that I'm going to want to notify. Now that I've done that, it's going to ask me, what do I want to tell them? All right, I'm going to ask them to update their opportunities. So I can put a title. And we're going to pretend I don't make typos when I'm typing on WebEx's 2. Okay, so now that I've done those basically 3 things, it's going to go through the rest of my flow. It's going to give me a success message. It's going to show me here everything that I actually put into it. And you'll notice now I have a new notification in my little notifications bell. And this notification right up here matches exactly with what's in my flow. So it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Hopefully you find it very powerful. So now to dig into how we actually build this. First things first, we'll go look at the flow and then we'll bounce around a little bit. So I'm going to start by doing 3 things. I'm going to get the running user. I'm going to get a list of permission sets. Actually, I'm going to get the single permission set that I need for this particular flow, and then permission set assignments. And basically, I use these 3 things to help me manage what the user sees when they click on the send notification in the utility bar, which we'll demo with a different user a little bit later. So then I have a decision. is this user allowed to access the flow? If they are, great, you'll see the screen that we went to. If not, they get an error screen with a message that tells them they don't have access to this flow because I can't hide it from the utility bar. So in the screen for the flow, I have two radio buttons, and then I have two record choice sets. And so the interesting thing about a record choice set, and I hope Steve Mo forgives me this, is behind the scenes, they function as multi-select pick lists. So that actually creates a little bit of a challenge for us to work through later. So after that, I have the screen where we're building the content. So it's just two text boxes, fill in whatever you need. Then we get into some of the more interesting stuff. So the recipient type, and now I'm starting to make a decision. So my first question is, do I want all users? Or do I want just groups of users or groups of public groups? So why I'm doing this decision is if it's all users, I have a public group. I don't need any more input from my users, so I can immediately go and just grab that particular ID. Otherwise, I need to go pull the subflow to parse a multi-select to be able to pull that multi-select checkbox group into a collection variable instead. And so this is where David's Salesforce Sidekick blog comes in. It's an unmanaged package that you can download and install into your org and then call as a subflow. And it's pretty cool because basically what it does is it takes this semicolon separated pick list and puts it into a comma separated collection variable. So essentially, there we go. It's a 4-step flow. And so this is all that it's handling for you, and you just need to put the input and the output that you want it to go into so you can use it back in our flow. So let's go take a look at this real quick for the groups, which is the use case we had. And so my input value is going to be that multi-select string. So it's the group that actually got selected. And so the reason I have this in here twice is this is the actual record, the screen component for my select groups checkboxes. And the other one does the same thing for groups. And I output it to a collection variable called recipients. So then if I've used either one of these, I decided to add an assignment so that the current user also gets that notification, even if they're not one of the groups involved. I don't need to do that with the all users simply because all users is everyone, so they're already included. So then after that, I have another decision to make. Which notification type do I want to use? Is it going to the desktop, the mobile, or both? And that's where we are going to jump over into your custom notification types. So when you set this up under custom notifications, it asks you to set up the different types. You can have up to, I think it's 500. Honestly, I cannot think of a reason for more than 3. So if anyone has use cases for that, I would love to know why. But essentially all you're doing is you're naming it and you're setting the channel that it goes to. So it's either desktop, mobile, or both. So these are the 3 that we have set up. So, and it's really simple to do this. Literally, all I do is give it a name. So let's say mobile 2, select the channel, and hit save. So back over in our flow, again, I need to be able to set that as part of my action. So I will go through and get the record ID for whichever of those 3 were selected. Once I have that, I can go ahead and set that in an assignment to a variable so that I have the ability to put that into my notification. So then finally we get to the action. And so this is the actual local action to send a notification using that custom notification builder. So there are 5 or 6 things that it wants here. I've only used 5 of them. So the notification ID type, I looked up and assigned to that variable, put it in here. The body and the title are literally just the screen values that I had. The recipient ID is that collection variable that I either stripped out of that collection group through my subflow from David, or it's just the public group all users ID. Now the kicker is this has to be a collection variable. It's a requirement for the notification types. Even if there's only one, it still has to be a type of collection. Now the kicker with this is the target ID. And if you set this up through Process Builder, it'll ask you what the target record is, and usually it's the record that started your process. So if you click on the notification, this is where it's actually going to take you. Well, in this case, I don't have a record for it to take me to, so I decided that the running user's profile was the best place to kind of dump this out, because if there's someone who has a question about the notification, they're going to need to ask the person who posted it, and you can set a chatter message right there on their profile. So then after that, then I have the success screen where I just regurgitate everything that they put in so that they can see all of their inputs. And that way, if they did happen to make a mistake, they will know that maybe they need to do a different one or clarify somehow with the people it was sent to. And I also just like success messages to make certain that people know whatever was supposed to happen behind the scenes actually did happen. So, and Jen, I am sorry, I'm gonna have to step away for just a second.
Okay. All right, so while we wait for Michelle to get back, let me take a look at a question that's not related to her her presentation, and this is, how do you host Flow on a third-party website? I've not done something like that. Rakesh, would you know? Oh no, Rakesh is on mute. All right. So I would recommend that you post that question out on the Salesforce automation Trailblazer community, and hopefully either Rakesh or David is able to answer that offline. All right, let me take a look to see if there are any general process automation questions that we can take while we're waiting for Michelle to get back.
All right, sorry about that. Thanks so much, everybody.
Oh, no problem.
So yeah, essentially that's the use case of the flow, and step by step how we do it. Now we can kind of go back and look at some of these things. But I wanted to kind of give you an overview of what we're doing. So the first thing I do for a get running user, if I go in here, essentially, the way you pull the running user into Flow, it's not necessarily a system variable that you can just get at. So if you create a formula that then does have access to the system variable of user, you can pull that user ID in and use it to get the running user. So one of those little quirks I found, again, if somebody has a better way to do this, I'm all ears. But that's how I find out who the running user is. After that, I've set the permission set. And actually, let's go look at that real quick before we get to this step. So the cool thing about how you can do this with permission sets is there is actually something on your perm sets now called flow access. So in order to be able to find it easily, I named it with flow access and then the name of the flow. So I shouldn't have any questions as to what I'm doing with this particular permission set. Once I get into that, I could not find this for the life of me, I swear. Thank you to the Ohana, especially Mike DiMaria, who actually showed me where this was. It's under this new section called Flow Access. So when you click on Flow Access, it's going to give you a list of all of the flows where you have overridden the ability to just automatically access the flow by default. And then you can go ahead and add them to this particular chain or permission set. And I have absolutely no idea why all of a sudden it is not here. It was totally here last night. But that essentially is how you're going to set that permission. So the other part that goes along with that, if we jump back over to our actual flow screen, so once you're actually in your flows, you have a list of all the flows in your org. If you click on the caret next to that, then you can go in to edit your access. And so this is where you can override the permission for who can access this particular flow. So by default, if you have run flow or manage flow in your profile or in a permission set, or if on the user record you've checked that flow user box, you're automatically giving flow access to your users, which is great. Most of the time you want that, especially if they're auto launched or anything like that. I always make sure that they have that checked just so I don't have any conflicts with permissions. So, okay. Now if I check this box to override the default behavior, it's going to start ignoring any profile permission set or user record settings related to flow, and it's only going to grant access here through what I give it permission to from a profile standpoint or back in permission sets. So in my case, my system administrators ought to be using this to send notifications out to maybe specific groups or the entire company of, hey, we're doing some maintenance, or we've done some maintenance, or there's, something's weird with the system. Maybe Permageddon happens again. Let's hope not. So I'm going to enable it for system administrators. But most of my other users share profiles between different departments and different job responsibility groups. So I can't necessarily just grab an entire other profile to be able to assign it to the rest of the people that I want to have access for this. And so that's where, if we go back, we can actually assign this permission set, and I totally failed at that. So let's go back to permission sets one more time. And so essentially, I can do this on a per user basis. So for example, my vice president of sales and marketing, I think should probably have the ability to be able to do this. So I want to make sure that I can assign this to her. And then I'm also going to give it to the managers of my sales teams. So Ted Broadfield is one of our managers, so I'm going to go ahead and assign this permission to him. And given our little snafu earlier, I'm just going to double check my flow settings here. All right, so if we go back into the flow access, again, now it will show me that the only flow in my org that I've overridden standard access for is this flow, and it's enabled under this permission set. So if you have multiple permission sets or multiple flows that you want to enable this way, and everyone should have the same access, you can absolutely do it in a single permission set. Otherwise, you can get down to the granularity of an individual permission set for an individual flow, and you can set the access down to that level of granularity. So I think that's kind of a cool perk that they've added to that now. So, but because that determines whether or not they should access the flow, I need to get that here. So I'm pulling the permission set in, and then the junction object that basically handles what permission sets are assigned to which users is your permission set assignments object. And so because of that, I've basically gone and grabbed, again, the user ID needs to be who the permission is assigned to. And the permission set that they're assigned is the ID of the permission set that we just looked up. So that's essentially why I'm grabbing all of that information at the beginning of my flow. So once I find an assignment, basically my next decision is a null check. Because if it found a record, that's great, that's what we want. And then they have access to the flow. So this decision is basically threefold. If they're a sysadmin profile, go ahead, I don't even need to do anything more, I know they have access. Or if this permission set is assigned, which means my permission set assignments get records is not null, then I found what I was looking for and they should have access. For everybody else, they don't have that permission set assigned, they shouldn't be able to see it. And it gives you this disgusting red error message when you click on it in the utility bar if you don't have access. Much like you have the issue with you can't hide a whole tab, you can just hide the contents of a tab on a Lightning record page. You don't have to give them access to the flow in your utility bar, but they can still see that as an option on the utility bar to click. So for a better user experience, I put an error message screen up there and just basically told them, you're here because you don't have access. If you think this is an error, we encourage them to reach out to our Salesforce admin team, and we've actually instituted a custom object to track those requests called AAA, which is short for Ask an Admin, and it's a little play on the fact that we're roadside assistants for Salesforce. So it's a little way to have fun in our org. Okay, so we went through the select recipient screen, but what I wanted to show you is actually some of the nuance behind the scenes for the record choice sets. So I have naming conventions for everything in my flow, just as an aside. If you're new to flow, I find this to be super important. So that I can tell at a glance what I'm looking for. So if it's a variable, I put VAR at the beginning. If it's a record choice set, I go with an RCS. Choices have Cs, formulas have FMLs. So especially if I want to use the same name, so to speak, like recipients, that could be a number of different things. I need to know which is my variable, which is my collection variable, which might be a formula or something like that. So I actually wasn't sure at first if this was a collaboration group or a public group that it was sending to, so I actually made record choice sets for both, and found out that it is indeed your public groups, not your chatter groups. The one important thing to realize with the public groups is there is a setting for them to inherit access through hierarchies. If you do that, and you have someone that is at the bottom of the role hierarchy in a group, anyone who is above them in the role hierarchy or in their structure is also going to automatically be assigned to that group. So if you have that setting enabled, you could potentially start to kind of spam your users, I guess, or they might be getting a lot of notifications that may or may not be relevant to them necessarily. But the record choice set for public group, essentially there were two things that I found. And because I have the all users choice, I didn't want to redisplay that in my groups for them to select from. So I said, go get every object in my group or every record in my group object, unless the developer name is all users, because I've already covered that. And also public groups technically include queues. And I didn't necessarily want this to go to a queue, so I made sure I pulled that type of public group out. Now for your use case, it may be perfectly valid, or you may want to split these so that you have one choice set for actual public groups and one choice set for different queues. So that would be another way that you could do it. Then to also make sure that it was easy to read, since when we're pulling records, most everything goes by the ID, I sorted it alphabetically by name, and I made sure that the label displayed to my user is the name of the public group, while at the back end I'm storing the ID because that's what Salesforce needs for that recipient collection variable. And of course, for now, anytime we're dealing with IDs, the data type has to be text, which Safe Harbor, I believe, is changing in summer 20. Okay, so now that we have done that, the users also was a really interesting experiment. And I will preface this by saying that selecting from any of your users is probably a bad idea if you're more than a couple hundred users strong. I would definitely recommend in that situation that you don't give people the ability to pick and choose users, or if you do it a different way besides a record choice set, because it will be astronomically large and difficult to manage. So the first time I did this, I noticed I had a couple of weirdo users in my list of all users. Data.com clean, platform integration user, automated process, and system all kept showing up as active users in my org. And I went, okay, well, I know those are users that Salesforce needs for things, but I don't want them in this list. But I don't know what else there may be in the future. So I thought I had a great workaround, and it was like, okay, well, they have to have a profile, right? So we'll stick the profile ID not being null as my other condition, and that'll kick them out, right? Wrong. If I would have thought it through just a couple seconds longer, I would have realized that while you can set a user without a role, you cannot set a user without a profile. So handy dandy little trip to Workbench later, I discovered that there are these two rando profiles that don't actually show up with records in your org that are assigned between these 4 different system users. And so essentially what I did is I threw in conditions that the profile ID that was assigned to any one of those 4 could not be on the user records that I grabbed. And then I was able to take it out so only my active human users got to be in this list. Again, at this point, I only have about 100 users, so it's not a hugely overwhelming list to deal with. So if we flip back over to home and if I relaunch this, I'll actually show you what this looks like and why this would get a little unwieldy if you were to try and do this for a large org. So at about 100 users, I still have to scroll probably about 3 times to reach the bottom. So I'm sure you can extrapolate what that would be like if it were 2,000 users or 20,000 users. And that's when it's going to become a much better user experience to go, let's just do this with public groups. So that's a definite other kind of gotcha to keep in mind as you're potentially using this. Okay, so again, I think most of the rest of it is pretty straightforward. Again, the other place I use that formula for user is once I have the recipients collection variable from either one of my checkbox groups, I went ahead and I added, and you have to make sure if you're new to Flow that you add to a collection variable instead of equal it, otherwise you're going to erase everything else that's in there. My formula, again, to pull the ID of the running user, so that is also a person that's going to be receiving that notification. So again, because I don't have to do that up here, I just got the ID and then assigned that as my only value in that collection variable when I went the all users route. And so basically it's just the ID of the record that I got from that get records element. So, okay. With that, I think I've covered the vast majority of the pieces in the flow. So let me just double check here. And when the presentation is loaded, it'll actually have screenshots for everything in case you don't have the ability to go watch the recording again. But I did want to jump back in here and talk a little bit about some resources. So number one, here is a link to David Litton's blog post in the unmanaged package. I was reading on unofficialsalesforce.com earlier today, and it looks like in summer 20, they are coming out with a way to do this natively. But again, hashtag safe harbor. The release isn't out yet, so promises should not be, or decisions should not be made on things that I promise are there. But this may be a different way to do it instead of needing the unmanaged package, but honestly, it's a pretty cool unmanaged package anyway, so I was totally fine putting that in my org. If you're not comfortable or familiar with the notifications, here's a couple of help articles, one on how you create those notification types along with the limits, as well as some of the help around that core action within the flow to send custom notification. And so if you do forget that you have to have that as a collection variable, this help article will handily remind you of that. The custom notifications did come out with the Winter 20 release, so if you want to learn more about any of that, there's a link to the release notes. And of course, as Rakesh mentioned earlier, coming up this month, wow, it's already May, is virtual Dreamin. And so it's going to be totally awesome. I think it's 4 tracks and it's 24 hours. So no matter what time zone you're in, there's going to be content for you to be able to watch. And I've seen many people posting that they're presenting. And so there's going to be some super awesome content there. And some of it will also be flow related. So absolutely encourage you to check any of that out. So, but with that, I will open it up for any questions.
Okay, we have a queue of questions for you. All right. Someone asked if we could go back to the last 3 get records. I think those are the notification types. If you could just show us those. Yes,
yep,
those 3.
Absolutely. So essentially, it's the developer name, the API name for each one of my 3 notification types. So desktop only. And so I just went and got the object custom notification type, and I found the record I wanted that matched the delivery channel, which is exactly why I named them the way I did. So same thing, mobile is mobile only. And then if I want desktop and mobile, it's the one labeled desktop mobile. I'm super duper creative with namings.
Okay, the next question is from Courtney. What is the link to the MSP Collection link? I believe, Courtney, you're asking about the download link?
So are you looking for this URL? If she is, it's actually a link in the presentation that will be posted. But I think we can probably dump this in the chat too.
Mm-hmm.
I just have
Yep.
to be smart enough to figure out how to do that in GoToMeeting.
There should.
So there we go. Got it.
Okay. Great.
Um, so yeah,
Right. If
the link
that's
to the blog
not,
is there.
yeah, Courtney, if that's not your question, if you could just paraphrase, that'd be great. Okay. The next one, Ruth says, I wonder if being able to choose more than one type of notification type would be for added channels, things like chat.
I was wondering about that. This is absolutely iteration one, because people like to consume things differently. Our use case was absolutely to stop sending emails, but there is a core action to send an email directly from Flow. You can also post to Chatter from Flow. So with a few modifications, you would probably be able to tweak this to also give yourself the additional options to maybe send emails to users or even contacts, um, to be able to post to Chatter. Again, the post to Chatter is going to present kind of that same challenge that I had with the targets record. And so I would probably use the user that is the notification poster as the target for your Chatter post and put it on their profile essentially. So, but yeah, no, I kind of wondered about that and was thinking through it, because I pitched this to my boss and she was actually kind of excited about it and thought it was pretty cool. So not only do I get to do this just for automation hour, but I probably get to put this in my own org too.
Cool. All right, next question. Could you use a get records element to get users in the public group instead of parsing the users in the manage package?
Yes. I'm trying to think through if that would work if you had more than one public group at a time that you wanted to send it to, and you'd probably have to loop through your public groups to grab the IDs from every public group and add them all to the same variable. But that would definitely be another option, I think, unless I'm completely misthinking through this.
No, that sounds about right.
So I found this easier because it was multi-select. And so that was easier for me just to go grab the IDs of multiple groups at a time.
All right, next question. Any advice, suggestions that we need to keep in mind when we expose Flow to guest users on a community portal?
This is my kryptonite. We have absolutely no communities and we don't have anybody outside of our org access anything. So I can safely say I have no experience with that whatsoever and will not pretend to answer it.
I too have limited exposure to building a community. I think things to keep in mind is the ability to manipulate records. I don't know what your Flow use case is, but I know they like tighten down the ability for guest users to interact with certain objects and do things. So that's something I think you would need to keep in mind. Also, since my other colleagues are not on the call, if you could also post that to the Trailblazer Community Salesforce Automation Hour, I'm sure there are plenty of people with experience that would jump in and answer that question for you.
Yep, I would also check out unofficialsalesforce.com. I know they've made some more improvements in summer 20 coming with guest user access and some things like that, along with the changes to be able to actually run in system context, view all data. Depending on how you launch your flow, if that has access for a guest community user and you're using that type of flow permissions, you're basically opening up your whole org to them. So I will echo what data they actually get to touch and manipulate and maybe even see would be a consideration for sure.
Someone I would consider an expert on community and flow is Megan Broadkey. So if you want to mention her, she's an awesome resource.
I'll second that. Absolutely. She's amazing.
All right, next one. I missed the first few minutes, so I apologize if this was said. Oops, I lost my, okay. But what is the benefit of using this customized tool versus chattering to users?
Part of the reason I wanted to go this way is the notification bell is a little more in your face, and depending on how people have their chatter settings set, they may only get a weekly digest if you post to a specific group, or they may only get it daily, and if you want it a little bit more immediate than that, or something that's available within Salesforce versus email was kind of our use case for that. But certainly it's going to depend on how you've structured your org and how you've kind of trained your users to use the different tools that are in there. But that's kind of my use case for doing this versus chatter. While I'd love to be able to control that for all my users, logging in as all 100 of them to set their chatter post settings to the way I think it should be, not really something I wanted to do, I guess. And also trying to figure out how to @mention all of them if you were doing subsets of users as opposed to groups would get a little challenging as well.
Michelle, can you show us how you added the flow to the utility bar, please?
I would love to show everybody that. Okay, so I don't know where anything is in setup. I just search for things. So app manager is where we're looking for, which is apparently under apps, thanks to, you know, the joys of quick search. So then you go and you find the apps that you want to add this to. So I don't think I have it in member engagement yet. So let's go ahead and add it there. So you go in and you edit the particular app that you want it in. And then we wait patiently for Michelle's internet to catch up with Michelle's presentation skills. And then the utility items do show on desktop only. So that is one limitation just to be aware of. And then you click add utility item. And you can add all sorts of things, different chatter feeds, publishes or publisher list views, macros, blah, 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 and also flows. So once you have added your flow, you can change the label. So I just updated this to send notification. You can change the width and height wherever you want here. And then you go and you select the flow that you're looking for. And only screen flows are going to be options here for you to pick from. So again, I actually named mine with utility bar because I knew that's where I wanted to put it. Then you select whether you want a 1 or 2 column layout. For this, it was actually pretty brutal to have it 2 columns, so I left it at 1 column. And so that pretty much is how you add it to the utility bar. So, and again, I did that, and then I went in and I started testing it, and I'm like, great, now that I've done all my flow access, let's make sure that somebody who shouldn't be able to get to this can't see it, and got my nasty red error message. And so that's what prompted me to go back and go, okay, let's look and see who the user running this is. Let's look and see if they have the permission set assigned or the right profile, and then maybe we'll give them a nicer error message screen than just some awful red system error that probably doesn't even look like anything they can read.
So on that same lines, Daniel, hi Daniel, had a question. I'm not sure if I'm missing something. If the person doesn't have permission to run the flow, why the need to check their permissions within the flow as the first get records? How do they get that far to even run the flow? So we already answered that.
Yeah.
From the utility bar.
So, and I'll actually just show you that. So essentially what happened is I logged in as John, who is one of my support reps. And so I clicked on send notification and I got this ugly red error message that was like, you can't do anything. You're in the wrong spot. You have no access. Oh my gosh. Kind of looks like that. And then it freaked out on me, which is super exciting. All right, fine. Apparently we're not testing as John today. I'll go back and test as Robin, who I used last night. I should never sleep again after I set up for one of these presentations, clearly, because it just does not do what I want it to after I've slept. But yeah, basically that error message right there is what happens because you cannot remove that from the utility bar for them. So instead, I'm like, all right, I need a nicer error message to display to someone that says, you're in a spot you're not supposed to be. Please turn around and go back, essentially. But the reason for that is I thought about, just opening up access to everyone. And then I went, I'm going to get that person who, bless their heart, in true Southern form, decides to send a mass notification to the entire company going, how do I update the stage on an opportunity? Wow, this is super exciting. All right, so clearly something in Flow is not working right.
Yeah, weird.
Yeah, but it's basically supposed to do this where I figure out whether or not it's, let's say, John or Robin, and they don't have this permission set assigned. And they're also not a sysadmin user, so therefore it should bring them to a very nice looking screen that just says, you're not supposed to be here. So that was the reason for all of that. What is going on? Apparently my sandbox has gremlins. I'm so sorry.
Sorry. All right, next question. What user settings need to be selected so the user does not receive an email notification on top of the chatter notification?
Well, that's going to depend on their settings. If you @mention someone in chatter, they're going to get an email notification regardless. Because that's kind of the whole point of the @mention is to get someone's attention immediately. So in terms of how frequently they get chatter emails, you can set it under your personal settings. So if I go over here, this ought to be where it is. And you can set your different frequency determinations, especially for like groups that you're in. So under email notifications here, what's going to send you an email? You've got a series of checkboxes here. So if someone mentions you in a post or a comment or sends you just a direct message, and then your personal digest, you can set to daily, weekly, or never. So if they never want anything out of chatter, which I wholly and strongly do not recommend, but it's an option for the user to say they don't ever want a personal digest from chatter. And then you can actually come down here and actually look at all of the different chatter or collaboration groups you're a part of, and you can set how frequently you want those. So you can either do it in mass for all groups or you can do it group by group. So, but that is under the user profile settings from your avatar in the top right. Yeah, that's right.
All right, next question. Lonnie asks, theoretically, I can't even say the word. You could create an admin-only app as well as house the utility bar, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's something that we've toyed with. But much like the cobbler's kids have no shoes, building ourselves our own admin app is probably the last thing on our list of stuff to do. So I have pipe dreams that someday I will get one.
All right, Daniel says, I get it. We let the flow run and then check it at runtime with the get so they don't get that nasty Salesforce error message.
At least you do when Michelle builds it properly, which apparently I didn't.
And our last question, unless someone else submits something, so please, if you do have questions on Michelle's presentation or a general process automation question, you can submit that. But Bruce asks, could it be a different version of Flow running, one without that user permission check?
Not quite sure I'm following the question. Can you read that one more time?
Could it be a different version of the Flow running, one without that user permission check? That might be causing the issue? I don't know. Bruce, if you could paraphrase your question.
If I follow that correctly, it could be. Yeah, it's entirely possible that I'm not on the right version of this flow for some reason. So I think version 6 is my most up to date. yeah, no, I'll absolutely have to do some debugging and try and figure out exactly why it's not getting all the way to here.
Yeah, he confirmed that it's about the current problem that we're seeing.
Yeah, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I didn't give them access to run the flow at all. So checking that within the flow was an absolutely boneheaded move on my part. You can't run through the first 5 elements of the flow if you're not allowed to run the flow, period. So that brilliant fix to fix that was absolutely a bomb and totally wrong. But this is what happens when I try and do this at like 9 o'clock at night. So can we just scratch that part of this presentation?
We'll edit it out.
And you know what, guys? This is how you learn flow. You come up with solutions, you run into an issue, you think you have a workaround for it, and then all of a sudden, you don't. So essentially, what I will be doing is I will be going and giving everyone access to run the flow. But again, if they don't have the permission set assigned, it'll still dump them to the error message screen.
For those who joined late, because I saw several questions about this posted, after each session, we do post the recording as well as the link to the deck in several locations. So automationhour.com is our website. So if you go to previous webinars, you'll see the link to every single webinar that we've had and the recording. We also have a YouTube channel, Automation Hour, and that is where all our recordings are hosted. And we'll also post out on our Trailblazer community, Salesforce Automation Hour, when the deck and recording are posted as well, and I will tweet it out as well as my co-hosts Rakesh and David. So those are multiple ways that you can get the recording and the deck. So with a couple of minutes left, I'm just going to see if there are any additional questions out there. And again, if you're out on automationhour.com, I recommend registering for our June 5th session. That's the session where we'll have the Salesforce automation product managers on there to do a deeper dive of the summer 20 features that they will talk about on Release Readiness Live, but they'll do a deeper dive in these sessions with us, as well as talk a little bit more about roadmap. So it's going to be unique and different from what you see on Release Readiness. So I definitely highly encourage you to attend, and you also get to ask questions as well, interact with them. So I don't see any other questions coming in. So rather than hold you all up, thank you, Michelle, again for presenting. I know you've already submitted to present sometime later this year, so I look forward to that. And you know you're always welcome back, so.
Well, thanks. I'll try not to screw up the next time I present on here. But yeah, no, I did actually just pull it up with a different user where as long as they have access to run the flow and don't have the permission set, it will still give them the error screen. But as always, I thank you guys for coming. If any of you guys want to, you know, ask more questions, follow up, if you want to try and do this yourselves and you get stuck and need a hand, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help the next generation of Flownatics find the awesomeness of flow.
Great. All right, and with that, thanks again for joining us, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, bye everybody.
Bye.